Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Today we want to talk a little bit about the potential end of all of our computer tinkering. As computer prices seem to be getting so astronomically high, one company which specializes in low-cost hardware for people to tinker on is saying, yep, we're just not going to release anything new for a while just because of all of the insanity. Now, is this part of some global hype, or is the AI hype just so overblown, or is this part of some more devious plan, something involving 2030 and owning nothing? Well, I don't know. Jeff Bezos seemed to say that back in January, and I remember covering this story on the Weekly News Roundup, but he was basically making the argument here that you don't need to buy your computers anymore. You'll just rent all your computing from the cloud. Well, that's interesting. How do you access that cloud computing? Clearly, we just have AI brain interfaces to the internet. You know, you come in and plug an Ethernet cord into your ear or something. We're plugged into the cloud. Obviously, you need some type of terminal to even access that. But then, what does that look like? You could make that pretty small, especially if you make them branded to your cloud service, like Microsoft could make one branded to its Windows Internet computers, then sell you that as a loss like Amazon does. You can access all of their computers in the cloud so that you won't own your computer. Of course, Apple is recognizing that the cost of things is going so high. We talk about this a couple times on the Weekly News Roundup also, where Apple is introducing this leasing program that you don't even need to own your phone anymore. You just pay a monthly fee forever. I mean, y'all are all taking out loans on everything. We no longer question, can I afford something, or can I just afford the payments? That's what it is. I don't know. I don't live my life that way. I own all my phones. I own all my computers. I don't have anything on lease. I don't have cars on lease. Nothing, and the problem is that things are getting so expensive. Apple is realizing that, they have to keep on raising their prices, so they keep on making all this money. But what happens, you want people to be able to buy all those sweet new Apple products. Well, you just make it cheaper by getting rid of the big, hefty, scary price tag and just make it all monthly. I mean, everyone's so used to paying subscriptions anyway. This is why Adobe has gotten rid of their one-time purchasing software, and why Microsoft is doing everything they possibly can to move everybody onto the Office 365 rather than selling you a perpetual license to the software, which even when they sell you the perpetual license on the software, as we showed recently in a video, that, they pull that out from you as well. It's kind of like it's a no-win circumstance. But you look at the computer prices and things are getting super high. Back in June, there's an article from CBS, and this article in CBS talks about the fact that gadget prices have fallen for decades, ever since the 1980s. And then AI happened and everything is skyrocketing. And this is a problem. In fact, I remember buying my very first real computer. I mean, I had it's either 386 or 486. I forget what it was, some DOS thing. And then when I went out to buy my first real computer, this thing was absolute cutting edge. This thing had a Pentium 5 100 megahertz processor. This is like top of the line. I had 32 amazing rip-roaring megabytes of RAM and a hard drive so big, they told me you will never fill this drive. It was so big, it was 1.6 gigabytes. For this amazing Rick-roaring computer at the top of the line, I paid about $1,200. Maybe it was $1,600. Maybe it was $1,800. It was somewhere around there. I think $1,800 is what it was. And I saved a lot of money from flipping burgers as a high school student to afford that thing, I gotta say. And since then, every computer price has gone down and down and down and down, where the computer I built almost a decade ago that I've been developing this content and the content for all my other channels on, I think I built everything in this system for, I want to say it was maybe $800. And it was an amazingly good computer at the time, and it is unfortunately dated. Well, a friend of mine just happened to have a Ryzen 7 7000 series processor laying around. He's like, I just do not have a need for this. Here you go, have a processor. Great. I just priced what it would cost me to put together just a basic computer out of that. It's going to be over $1,000 if I want to invest in that. We need to do a graphics card, and I looked at where I could source things locally. I didn't look in Walmart, which actually does have decent prices on some of these things. But, Best Buy, I could get the 16 gigs of DDR5 RAM for, I think I could go do $250, which is not a bad price. And then I could also do I could do a graphics card was $349. And then I still need a motherboard. I need a case. I need a power supply. I think I have a couple spare hard drives floating around. If I want one of those, we're talking about lots and lots of cash for that. But the fact is that just building a base level computer right now is becoming much more expensive because indeed these gadget prices are going higher. A lot of this has to do with AI demand. And we talked about Micron is, I believe it's the company behind Crucial. They basically said, yeah, we're just going to stop selling our stuff to the consumer market. We just make so much more money selling it to the data centers. And now Microsoft is stockpiling a bunch of computer components that they don't even have the possibility of getting these modern components into data centers with electricity before they're probably obsolete, yet still the prices are going up for everybody. But what do they care? They control all of the infrastructure, and they just want to do their part in making sure that we will own nothing and be very happy about it. But we start looking at all of the various types of technology. The AI is happening, the data centers, all this kind of stuff. Of course, why do we need all these data centers? To store and analyze all of that beautiful flock data, of course. I mean, geez, why not, right? But we looked at, the DRAM, the NAND. These and you don't realize there's only 3 chip manufacturers that makes all of these computer chips. And all of them are saying, yeah, we have sold out of our orders until 2027 at least. Now, is this all 100% data centers? Of course not. Big retailers like maybe Newegg or Best Buy or Walmart's, Micro Center, maybe to a lesser degree. I think Walmart can sell more computer components than Micro Center by the sheer vast number of their stores, But they can get in there and they can do some orders. So it's not all doom and gloom. You can look around for more parts. But we start looking at the various hobbyist market, and this is getting frightening, that looking at the Raspberry Pis. Now, they are keeping the lower level Pis still roughly the same prices. $45 is not a bad price for a Raspberry Pi. Of course, that's 1 gigabyte. I'm using the Pi 5 8 gigabyte for my actual web development computer, and I paid $85 for mine. It is now $175 3 years later, I think. Look at this, the 16 gigabyte version of the Pi. I just saw these in Micro Center for, I want to say they were $199 back in March, $305. The hobbyist market is getting drawn out. And this is what leads us to our main topic for discussing this, is that Pine 64. This is a company that really wants to produce inexpensive hardware so that people in the open source world can tinker around. And they're simply saying, you know what? We're just not releasing anything that requires any of these chips because they just cannot do it. Now, they could raise the prices like Raspberry Pi, but to be honest, a lot of the hardware they have, it's not really worth the higher prices. And I've had some. I've had a couple Pine phones, and they're fun to tinker with. I couldn't use a Pine phone in production. They just do not have the specs that need it. Batteries run out in less than 2 hours of regular use. The hardware on the software on it's a little bit buggy. Now, I didn't try a Pine Phone Pro, but they also, to my knowledge, haven't updated any of those in a long time. And even the last time I tinkered with those, which was a few years ago now, I think 3 years ago now, they weren't all that spectacular then. And system requirements going up, and all the different requirements, they're just not a good viable option. I had a Pine Tab. It was an interesting device, but it was cheaply built, and it was a little buggy. It was a little laggy. It's not something that I would go out and pay a lot of money for a full in-production system. But that's not what Pine 64 is typically selling things for. mostly to increase the software and things. And, it would be cool if they could come up with some of this hardware, if they could come up with a Pine phone that would work with all these Pine phone builds they're doing, but actually be a functional system that's not slow and laggy, that lasts at least a day in the battery. This would be a really good thing. They don't have those resources. And now they're saying, we are not going to be producing anything new. So basically they said that they have inventory that will probably run out in about 3 months for the Pine Note and the Pine Tabs. They're not making any more. Once those go out, they are not bringing them back until the prices of everything comes back down. Now, they do have a few things, the Pine Time, Pine Voice, and Pine Sill. Those will continue shipping since they do not rely on these memory chips. So looking at these various items here, they're not specifically saying AI is necessarily the problem, but they're talking about the DRAM and eMMC shortage, and that is data centers causing this. Not to mention, of course, DDR5 RAM absolutely has skyrocketed. I was actually surprised the local Best Buy has 16 gigs of DDR5 for $250. That is actually shocking to me. And if I wasn't already overextended right now, I might actually go together and put together that PC. But for now, I'm going to have to hold off because I've exhausted my disposable income for the period of time, possibly even until the end of this year. Yeeks. Orange Pi is also doing the same thing. They are also wanting to release a new version, but they cannot because of the DDR5 and the SSD prices will not come back down. And, who's going to pay $305 for a Pi 5 with 16 gigs of RAM when you can go online to Amazon, you can buy a Nano Tower computer that has an actual Intel chip for less than that. Let me go ahead and price that real quick. Let's just go into scamazon.com. And then we'll see what we can find over here. Let's go with a Dell Inspiron. Dell Inspiron Micro Tower. No Micro Tower. These small form factors. Here's 13th Gen i5 with 16 gigs of RAM, $90 more. You get the same amount of RAM and an i5 processor. Okay. Here's the same price. This is an i5 16 gigs of RAM. Older systems. Hey, these ones even have a hard drive. The Pis don't. You can look around. Look at this one here. This one's $220. This is probably a refurb. 16 gigs of RAM. Man, I should just buy that. Man, to buy that. This, by the way, is what I'm actually running my current system on. I don't know if this one's newer. This one has more RAM than my Endeavor system. I'm not sure about which generation my processor is. You can see, some of these obviously are more expensive, but you can still get computers that are a lot cheaper if you want to. And that's the sad part, is that we are being priced out of the consumer market. And is this by a sheer design, or is this by sheer hype, or is this the wet dreams of big tech billionaires that really want the companies to rule everything and to dictate to everybody? And hey, if you can't buy your computer and you need the latest computer, I was looking for articles in this. I saw some videos on this, but I couldn't find any articles to specifically supported it. But I think it was actually Infographics Show. I was watching a video that came out not too long ago, maybe even today. And he was really talking about how the technology, the computers we have are being burnt out faster because of the heavier processing, because AI is being crammed into places that even many of us don't even want AI to be at. And that in and of itself is another fundamental problem, that we are looking at in a world where we are being forced onto AI in places that AI doesn't have any business being. Yet it is what is being pushed on us, that the very presence of it there could cause our computers to die earlier than they used to. And then when that happens, we happen to have a major sticker shock just trying to buy something else. So what is my advice to you today? Well, here is the thing. If you have a little bit of disposable income, it would absolutely be worth you picking up a few extra computers that you can run Linux on, get them all set up, get them all running, make sure that they work so that if you are doing some application that AI kills prematurely, you're not in a pinch later on trying to buy something wherein things could be, maybe prices will come down, but the scarcity is there. So let's not rely on it too much. Maybe get a few other computers, have them available and around so that you can have things to fall back on, and just make sure that you have those. If you are looking to explore things like with Raspberry Pis or other single board computers, you really want to do a better job of speccing out what you want. Don't go for the 16 gig because, hey, it's a 16 gig. You really got to look at your actual needs and save yourself a little bit of money if the lower specs can actually get you those. I mean, if you're doing a simple VPN or a Pi-hole or something, you don't need 8 gigabytes of RAM in that one, all right? You can do away, you might be able to do with 4. In fact, you probably can. When I did my testing with Pi-hole, my testing with Pi-hole was actually done on a Nano. So, you know, then with a half a gig of RAM, I think, is on that thing. And it worked just fine. So for my testing purposes. But that's the things you want to look at is spec things out a little bit better. Don't spend the extra money unless you absolutely have to. And look around also on the used or refurbished market. There are always a lot of great deals on used and refurbished markets. You want to do this for your phones. You want to do this for your computer. As of right now, I think I'm running the Pixel 7a with Graphene OS. I still have my 5a, which works perfectly fine, although it's no longer supported with the latest security hardware. But at the same time, I don't really do anything on my phone outside of some basic checking the news and basic communication stuff. So I'm okay if I have to run an older version. I still do have my Razer phone. However, I have noticed when I have used that in emergency production that there's some places that, well, the towers don't seem to find it anymore. And it's very interesting to see exactly why that is. Like certain bandwidths are shut down. So that phone may not have the amount of brand signals that the Pixel phones have. So the Pixels are working a little bit better in many of these cases. But make sure you have a spare phone. If you don't already have a spare phone, you might look around for a spare phone. Look around on like Best Buy. You can get refurbished. Amazon. I've generally had good luck with refurbished phones. I did when I bought my 7a was from Amazon. The company shipped me the wrong phone and it was a super simple exchange for that. Also build a little bit of confidence and get the tools to repair your phones. You know, figuring out how to do basic screen repairs is not all that hard. Even if you have a phone that's all glued together, just have a little bit of confidence and self-reliance in yourself to figure out how to keep your things going a little bit longer. Look at computer upgrades where you can instead of buying a whole brand new computer. I had a case where one of my computers that's not in production anymore, I needed to use it for something and I go to turn it on and it's just like giving me a quick flash on the power button and I go, oh boy. I think the average person would take that computer and throw it away. But I was like, well, let's see what's wrong with this guy. I set her down, I opened the guts up, and all I did, apparently, probably what was happened is a RAM was misseated. So I actually pulled all the RAM out, started the computer up. It obviously gives you the error, hey, there's no RAM in this computer. Like, hey, that's better than a button that blinks on really quick and then turns off. So I reseat the RAM back in, boot the thing back on. I've not had a single problem with it since. So it must have just been some RAM that got unseated somehow. Maybe in the fact that it was moved around a little bit in storage because I hadn't used it for a while. But these are things, simple things that you can do. Don't get caught out swimming in the tide, skinny dipping when the tide comes in, okay? You can tell who's skinny dipping when that happens. Don't do that. Be prepared with a plan now. Their goal is for you to rely on them as much as you can. My goal for you is to rely on yourself as much as you can, because that is what gives you the most control in your life. Let me know your thoughts about all of this fun discussion in the comments down below, and make sure that you're not letting them pry that computer out until it is your cold, dead hands. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.